Iran's ballistic missile barrage, Israel's air defense. Overwhelmed ballistic missiles launched from Iran have struck several key areas in Israel, including Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Ramat Gan. According to Israeli military reports, a massive attack caused damage to both military facilities and civilian infrastructure. Despite claims of successful intercepts, the air defense system was overwhelmed and could not cope with the volume of threats. Media reports indicate that several strikes hit the northern part of Tel Aviv, where one of Israel's unofficial Pentagon military centers is located. Depots have been destroyed, barracks damaged, and power outages reported. In Haifa, fires erupted near the port, and smoke spread to surrounding areas. Roads in central Tel Aviv are deserted, cars abandoned on roadsides, and public transport halted. Residents have taken shelter in underground parking garages and metro stations operating as bomb shelters. According to Magen David Adom, Israel's National Emergency Medical Service, the number of calls exceeded 200 within the first hour of the bombardment. The Israeli Ministry of Defense announced the deployment of all available air defense systems, including the Iron Dome, Arrow, and David's Sling. Nevertheless, direct hits on civilian areas were confirmed. In Ramat Gan, several residential buildings were damaged, with partial collapses reported. Ben Gurion International Airport temporarily suspended operations, and airspace over the central part of the country was closed. This is the first time in recent years that Israel has been so isolated. Panic spread among the population, with chaotic evacuations and supply disruptions reported. Official IDF statements speak of maintaining control over the situation, but independent sources are publishing images of destruction and eyewitness accounts that contradict the official narrative. The discrepancy between the official and real picture is increasing public anxiety. According to international agencies, the strikes used high-precision weapons, including medium-range ballistic missiles, targeting strategically important facilities such as ammunition depots and logistics hubs. Based on the intensity of the attack, Iran demonstrated a high degree of coordination and knowledge of vulnerabilities in Israel's defense system. A heightened alert level remains in the bombarded areas. Civil defense forces continue clearing debris and evacuating residents. Medical facilities are operating 24/7. Preliminary data indicates over 150 injured and some fatalities. The situation remains extremely tense. The Ministry of Defense is considering mobilizing additional reserves. An operational headquarters has been announced to assess the scale of damage and coordinate retaliatory actions. A de facto state of emergency has been declared nationwide. The events of the past few hours are seen as the beginning of a new phase of the conflict. The scale of destruction, the effectiveness of the Iranian strike, and the overwhelming of air defense point to a qualitative change in the threat landscape. Israel is facing a complex attack combining missiles, information pressure, and elements of strategic destabilization. Air defense incapable, the Iron Dome breached. Despite years of investment in defense technology, Israel's air defense system demonstrated limited capabilities in the face of a saturated, coordinated attack. Iran's complex strikes included ballistic missiles, medium-range missiles, and kamikaze drones launched from multiple directions. IDF command admitted that the capabilities of the Iron Dome were overloaded. The system, designed to intercept a limited number of rockets and shells, proved unable to cope with multiple, simultaneous, high-density threats. According to experts, one of the key vulnerabilities was that the attack was designed to saturate targets. Hundreds of projectiles were launched in a short period from different directions, forcing air defense batteries to allocate resources to intercept each object. Priority was given to missiles whose trajectories led to densely populated areas, but due to time constraints, some threats were missed. According to a report by the Institute for National Security published during the crisis, most intercepts occurred in the vicinity of Haifa, where additional Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 systems were deployed. However, in the center of the country, including Tel Aviv and Ramat Gan, interceptor systems were unable to cover all attack vectors. For the first time in decades, direct hits were recorded on targets within the Iron Dome's operational zone. Israeli air defenses, developed to counter threats from Gaza and Lebanon, proved effective against Qassams and short-range rockets. However, ballistic missiles launched from Iran have different trajectories, altitudes, and power. Particularly alarming was the possible use of modified missiles with hypersonic characteristics. Iranian sources claimed the use of a ballistic missile with a highly maneuverable warhead capable of changing course in the final phase of its approach, making interception almost impossible. Although official Jerusalem denied information about hypersonic missiles, photographs of the destruction in Ramat Gan and Haifa confirmed the high accuracy of the hits. According to journalists, one projectile pierced the roof of a military equipment depot, causing a fuel explosion and wall collapse. A similar situation was recorded in the Jaffa area, where a missile destroyed the territorial defense headquarters. From a technical standpoint, the system failure was linked not only to overload, but also to Iran's tactics. Along with ballistic missiles, decoys were used, unmanned aerial vehicles carrying no warheads but capable of mimicking the trajectory of a combat projectile. These drones created an additional burden on radar calculations, forcing air defense to react to every potential threat. An additional complicating factor was the attack on air defense strongpoints. According to some reports, some Iranian missiles were aimed not at civilian infrastructure, but directly at air defense command centers and launch pads. In particular, direct hits on David's sling batteries were recorded in the Rishon LeZion and Hadera areas, limiting their ability to retaliate. In parallel, an information attack unfolded. Fabricated videos, allegedly showing a complete failure of air defense systems, appeared online. Although most of these materials were recognized as fakes, they had a strong psychological impact on the population. Panic intensified, and public trust in official sources decreased. Military analysts began discussing the need to revise the entire architecture of Israeli defense. The current model, based on segmented defense with fixed batteries, proved insufficiently flexible. Discussions are underway about creating mobile complexes using AI for prioritizing targets and minimizing reaction time. As a result of current events, the Israeli Ministry of Defense initiated an urgent purchase of additional radar systems and requested support within the framework of military technical cooperation with the U.S. However, as analysts note, technical improvements will not solve the strategic problem, the lack of preparation for a full-scale attack from the eastern direction. Thus, the failure of Israeli air defense has become a symbol of the conflict's transition to a new level. A strategy that worked for decades proved ineffective against an updated, well-organized, and asymmetric threat. The question arises, can Israel adapt before it's too late? Israel alone, Trump out of play. In the first hours after Iran's massive attack, the international community expected an immediate reaction from the United States, Israel's main ally for decades. However, instead of operational support, Washington demonstrated caution and distance. The U.S. Department of State issued a statement emphasizing that the United States was not involved in any Israeli actions against Iran that began on June 13th. This phrasing came as a cold shower for those expecting automatic U.S. involvement in the conflict. President Donald Trump, known for his tough rhetoric against Tehran, limited himself to a series of social media messages. He reiterated that Iran should not possess nuclear weapons and urged citizens to leave Tehran. However, no direct hints of military aid to Israel were made. Moreover, at a White House briefing, an administration representative clarified that the United States does not plan to intervene in the ongoing events. Such a stance caused confusion. For Israel, it meant that at the moment of the most serious military threat in decades, the country stood alone. Even during previous conflicts, whether Operation Cast Lead or strikes on targets in Syria, the U.S. had at least symbolically confirmed support. Now, silence. Observers noted that the current U.S. administration is acting with extreme caution amid global instability, internal pressure, and rising tensions with China and Russia. Washington is trying to avoid direct involvement in the Middle East escalation. Support for Israel at the intelligence and armament level continues, but the diplomatic line is distinctly detached. Against this backdrop, the contrast stands out sharply. Iran is not alone. Behind Tehran stand the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas in Gaza, as well as active political and military contacts with China and Russia. The press service of China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs declared support for the territorial integrity of all states in the region, but did not condemn Iranian actions. Moscow, in its characteristic style, called on both sides to exercise restraint, remaining in the role of a potential negotiator. Meanwhile, the Israeli press increasingly raises the question, where are the allies? Why, despite strategic partnership agreements, is Israel effectively alone? The answer lies partly in the geopolitical equation. Israel is an important but not the only U.S. partner, and when the risks of involvement in a new war outweigh political dividends, priorities are quickly reevaluated. Public reaction within Israel has been mixed. On one hand, there is an understanding that allies are not obliged to intervene automatically. On the other, disappointment is palpable. Amid the destruction in Haifa and Ramat Gan, voices are being heard about the need to revise foreign policy doctrine. Israeli analysts are beginning to discuss how realistic it is to strengthen independent military capabilities without hoping for immediate external support. Former IDF officers openly speak of a strategic reevaluation. One of them, a retired colonel, said in an interview, "If we can no longer count on immediate U.S. cover, then we must change our approach to preemptive defense." By this, he meant not only modernizing air defense, but also preventive strikes against potential threats, even without external support. At the diplomatic level, there is also a slowdown. The UN Security Council meeting did not lead to concrete decisions. None of the permanent member states proposed a resolution for a ceasefire. Israel presented evidence of Iran's violation of international law, but did not receive unanimous support. Even the UK, traditionally supportive of Israel, took a cautious stance, calling on both sides to dialogue. Thus, the impression is that Israel has entered a phase of forced autonomy. No major power is willing to take the risks of direct confrontation with Iran. The U.S. limits itself to rhetoric. Europe is concerned about the stability of oil and gas supplies from the region, and China and Russia are using the situation to expand diplomatic influence. For Israelis, this has been a cold reminder. No allies can replace their own defense. No memorandums or agreements guarantee automatic support. And when missiles fall on residential buildings in Tel Aviv, it's important not only to intercept them, but also to understand who is truly ready to stand by and who will remain an observer. Houthis and Hamas support Iran. A broadening conflict. Amid Israel's apparent diplomatic isolation and the lack of active support from the United States, the geography of the military conflict has rapidly expanded. Almost simultaneously with a series of attacks from Iran, two pro-Iranian actors joined the escalation: the Houthi movement from Yemen and the Hamas group from the Gaza Strip. These actions confirmed that the conflict is no longer purely bilateral. It is taking on the characteristics of a multi-level regional confrontation. The first strike from outside Iranian territory came from the south. The Houthis, officially known as Ansar Allah, announced the launch of a hypersonic ballistic missile targeting a number of military and civilian facilities in Israel. According to their statement, the target was in the area between Tel Aviv and Africa, although exact coordinates were not specified. Moreover, according to Iranian sources, the missile launched from Yemen was of Palestinian origin and part of a larger wave of pre-planned strikes. This attack was accompanied by a statement from Houthi leader Abd al-Malik al-Houthi, broadcast from Sana'a. In his address, he openly supported Iran and expressed solidarity with the people of the Islamic Republic. He also called on the entire Muslim world to resist Zionist aggression and stated that Yemen would continue attacks on Israel until Tel Aviv ceased actions deemed oppressive towards Palestine and Iran. Furthermore, the Houthis reported that in May, they had already managed to strike Ben Gurion Airport, and this experience would be scaled up. Although the Israeli side did not confirm the hit, media then indeed reported a temporary closure of airspace and emergency cancellation of several flights. Simultaneously with Houthi actions, Hamas became active. On June 14th, the day after Iran's initial strikes, rockets were launched from the Gaza Strip towards southern Israeli areas. Air raid sirens sounded in the Netivot area, and although the rockets landed in undeveloped areas, their mere appearance was a signal. Hamas was officially entering a phase of direct support for Iran. Hamas spokesman Abu Ubaida published a statement on Telegram clearly outlining the group's position. "We will support Iran against Israel, and any strike on the Islamic Republic is an attack on the entire front of resistance." He also added that the Zionists are making a strategic mistake that brings them closer to inevitable destruction, if Allah wills. A high-ranking member of Hamas's political bureau, Izzat al-Rishk, issued an additional comment praising Iran for the accuracy of its strikes on Israeli military targets. He noted that despite Israel's statements about the reliability of the Iron Dome and other air defense systems, Iranian missiles successfully overcome defenses and inflict significant damage. Meanwhile, public opinion within Israel is alarmed not only by the very fact of strikes from different directions, but also by how coordinated the opponent's actions prove to be. From a strategic point of view, Iran managed to deploy a tactic of multi-vector pressure, where each attack diverts resources, destabilizes the situation, and deprives Israeli command of maneuverability. Military analysts note that such tactics resemble the mechanisms of asymmetric warfare, where the enemy does not need parity in armaments, but achieves an effect through surprise, mass, and a wide geography of strikes. The situation is exacerbated by the fact that, unlike regular armies, groups such as Hamas and the Houthis are not bound by international legal obligations. This gives them freedom in choosing tactics and attack methods. An additional threat is Iranian influence on the arsenals of these groups. Missiles used by the Houthis and Hamas are becoming increasingly accurate, long-range, and technologically advanced. There is reason to believe that part of their components were produced with the participation of Iranian military engineers. If this trend continues, Israel risks facing a full-scale threat not from one, but from three sides. In Israel, the discussion about the need to revise the defense doctrine is intensifying. Proposals have been made for a temporary blockade of the Gaza Strip, tightening control over the southern borders, and using force against Houthi infrastructure in Yemen. However, the implementation of these measures is fraught with political and international consequences. Thus, the intervention of the Houthis and Hamas in the conflict is becoming one of the key factors radically changing its dynamic. This not only expands the front of hostilities, but also elevates the conflict to the level of a regional confrontation in which Israel faces not just Iran, but a whole network of hostile forces, coordinated and ideologically united. And this circumstance requires an immediate strategic response. Why is Hezbollah silent? The strategic pause. Amid the growing escalation and the open involvement of Iran's proxy structures, the attention of analysts and journalists has naturally shifted to one of the most influential forces in the region, the Lebanese movement, Hezbollah. Despite several days having passed since the conflict began, the group continues to maintain silence, taking no active steps in support of Tehran. Against this backdrop, the question is increasingly being asked, why is Hezbollah currently out of play, and how long will this last? According to Lebanese media reports, an informal agreement was reached in Beirut on June 14th between the Lebanese government and Hezbollah leadership, with the participation of diplomatic mediators from France and the U.S. The essence of the agreement was to prevent Lebanon's involvement in the conflict between Israel and Iran. At the same time, information appeared in the Israeli press that Tel Aviv, through international mediators, sent a signal. In the event of an attack from Lebanese territory, a preemptive and full-scale strike would be launched on the southern areas of Beirut and the Litani River's eastern bank. At first glance, such an agreement might seem like a display of pragmatism. Lebanon is undergoing a severe economic crisis. Its banking system is ruined, the government is unstable, and a large part of the population is mired in poverty. A new war with Israel could lead to catastrophic consequences for the entire country. Nevertheless, given Hezbollah's ideological adherence to Shiite Iran and its military infrastructure ready for action, the organization's passivity seems atypical. Some experts believe that the silence is merely a tactical pause. Hezbollah leaders, according to Lebanese and Iranian sources, are carefully observing the course of the conflict. They are assessing the effectiveness of Iranian tactics, the reaction of the international community, and the behavior of the IDF. If it becomes clear that Israel is in a difficult position, it is not excluded that Hezbollah will transition to an active phase. An additional factor is political pressure from within Lebanon. A number of political parties and organizations, including the Christian Bloc and the Druze, openly oppose dragging the country into another war. After the devastating consequences of the 2006 conflict, when southern Lebanon was virtually destroyed, most Lebanese are not ready for a repeat scenario. This makes any military decision extremely sensitive and requiring particular caution. Meanwhile, the Israeli military is not relaxing. According to IDF information, units along the border with Lebanon have been reinforced in case of a sudden offensive. Iron Dome batteries have been redeployed to the Kiryat Shmona area. Hezbollah activity in the Nabatiyah and Baalbek areas is being monitored. Israeli drones regularly patrol the airspace over southern Lebanon, tracking the movement of suspicious groups. Simultaneously, in Tehran, officials are cautiously commenting on Hezbollah's role. A representative of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps stated that all resistance elements are on standby, but did not specify whether actions from Lebanon were planned. This could indicate both a desire not to provoke a premature Israeli reaction and a lack of certainty about the unity of the Shiite front. Within the Hezbollah movement itself, there is also debate. According to some leaks, some commanders advocate for immediate involvement in the conflict, pointing to the need for solidarity with Iran and Palestinian allies. However, the organization's political wing, closely tied to the Lebanese parliament and control over social infrastructure, leans towards a wait-and-see approach, hoping to avoid repression and international isolation. The threat from Israel in case of Hezbollah's activation should also be considered. The IDF could launch a full-scale operation in the north, which would mean a new war, possibly involving air, artillery, and ground forces. Given the heightened situation in Gaza, Yemen, and the center of the country, opening a new front is highly undesirable but may become necessary. Thus, Hezbollah's silence is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of strategic calculation. The organization is assessing political risks, economic consequences, and military prospects. Until the situation reaches a point of no return, the movement's leadership prefers to wait. However, if Israel continues operations against Iran and the international community does not take steps toward de-escalation, Hezbollah's involvement will become a matter of time. Amid these expectations, anxiety is growing. 3 fronts are already active: Iranian, Yemeni, and Palestinian. The fourth, northern, is currently dormant, but its awakening could be fatal. The real problem isn't Tehran, it's Netanyahu. Amid the chaos, destruction, and regional explosion of violence involving Iran, the Houthis, Hamas, and almost the entire network of proxy groups in the Middle East, a statement emerged that shocked not only internal Israeli politics, but the entire country. Former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, a man with many years of political and military experience, openly declared, "Israel's problem is not Tehran, not Gaza, not even Hezbollah. The problem is Benjamin Netanyahu." This statement was made on one of the central television channels. Olmert emphasized that it became clear precisely after October 7, 2023, when the tragic breach of the Gaza border occurred, that the current leadership of the country was incapable of ensuring security. Now, in the conditions of open conflict with Iran, these weaknesses have manifested with renewed force. He added that Israel found itself without a strategic plan, no unified doctrine, no political dialogue, no clear international positioning. While the army is forced to operate in crisis response mode, the government is engaged in self-preservation and PR. For many Israelis, such words resonate as a reflection of long-accumulated internal discontent. Protests, which began long before the current war, first over judicial reform, then over actions in Gaza, and now over the complete loss of strategic initiative at a moment of military threat, have reignited in the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Netanyahu's contradictory foreign policy is particularly evident in the current conflict. On one hand, he long pursued Iran's international isolation, insisting on sanctions and confrontation. On the other, his government, according to critics, allowed Israel's military vulnerability to develop, relying solely on technological superiority and failing to account for changed realities. In addition, his rhetoric toward the U.S. became a subject of discussion. Public attempts to pressure the Trump administration and later distance himself from the White House after the change of power created a cold distance at a time when Israel particularly needs diplomatic and military support. This isolation, according to analysts, is the result of erroneous decisions made over the past years. Economic and social consequences are also damaging the Prime Minister's authority. The wave of missile attacks led to the evacuation of tens of thousands of citizens, infrastructure shutdowns, and panic in the markets. Businesses are suffering, international flights are canceled, schools are closed, and hospitals are overflowing. Yet the political leadership continues to avoid concrete steps, acting in crisis management mode with statements but no systemic solutions. Furthermore, signs of discontent have begun to appear within the military command itself. Anonymous sources from the general staff told the press that the army did not receive clear instructions before the Iranian attack, and orders came chaotically, without coordination between units. This caused internal shock among officers and reservists called up in an emergency. The political opposition, previously fragmented, began to form a united front. Leaders of centrist parties proposed creating a temporary government of national unity, with Netanyahu removed from operational control of military actions. While such a step is not yet possible without a parliamentary majority, the very fact of discussion shows how much the situation has escalated. International observers have also begun to question the effectiveness of Israel's current leadership. Analytical reports from the Atlantic Council and Stratfor emphasize that the country finds itself in a state of strategic confusion. The absence of allies, the overstretch of the army, the breakdown of trust within society, all are signs that the crisis is deeper than just another round of war. Against this backdrop, more and more citizens believe that to win on the external front, internal change is necessary, not in a military sense, but politically. As long as Netanyahu remains in power, Israel is unlikely to develop a new strategy capable of adapting to the changed region and new types of threats. Paradoxically, at a time when enemies are striking from different directions, the country feels for the first time in many years that the real threat lies within the system. And for this reason, Olmert's words sound not like a political attack, but a diagnosis. Without changes at the top, no army will stand, no air defense will save, no ally will help. And if this conclusion is not realized, Israel risks losing not only this war but the very idea of national resilience. The conflict between Israel and Iran has escalated into a full-scale regional confrontation, affecting key cities, paralyzing the air defense system, and exposing Tel Aviv's geopolitical isolation. The massive attacks, joined by the Houthis and Hamas, demonstrated that Tehran is not acting alone but in coordination with a network of allies across the Middle East. At the same time, Israel finds itself in a situation where neither the U.S. nor Europe has provided clear support. This has led to an internal crisis of trust, weakening political structures, and growing public discontent. Ehud Olmert's statement, blaming the defense failure not on external forces but on Prime Minister Netanyahu, played a special role. The crisis, initially a missile conflict, revealed a deeper problem: the absence of strategic leadership and the inability to respond to new forms of threats. Without a political reset, Israel may not withstand the pressure, not so much military as systemic, emanating from both outside and within. What do you think will be the immediate next step in this rapidly evolving conflict?